Okay, Giorgio, you can go. Please open your microphone.
Thanks. Thank you, Besnik, again, for organizing this event, which I was very interested to see. I will be very interested to see how it rolls out. As you say in your invitation, from a project like Designscape, which focuses on design, one could expect creative solutions. And this idea of organizing this non-conference as a final event is one of those. We can call it maybe a serial conference because it includes quite a number of events spread in a time span of a couple of months, from here until the end of September. We start today with this kickoff discussion, which was live on Facebook. What can I say? I am the project officer assigned to Designscapes, so I have followed the developments of the project for 3 years and some months, and I was what I can say about from where I sit, I could observe how the project developed within the scope and beyond, actually. So to the point that it has produced quite an impressive number of initiatives at local level in 100 something cities all over Europe, thanks to the micro project, which were funded with the financial support to third parties, or cascade funding, as commonly known, with these 3 calls. The experience that have been developed at local level, witness for the so many interesting projects that have been developed at local level, witness for the soundness of the methodology, the usefulness of the financial support as a tool to create also communities of innovators, of creative people all over Europe, and how the urban environment, the urban level, is very suitable for the kind of relationship that communities can build at human level, and the capacity to move to have a sense of common goals with different stakeholders, different people from different backgrounds, brought together thanks to design thinking and the approach that Designscapes has invented, basically. Witness for all the good work that has been done until now, and that in this series of events will be presented and discussed further and beyond the consortium. So thank you very much for organizing this. It will be a pleasure for me to attend and follow for the sessions that will come, and for today, of course.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. Thank you very much for your nice words. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for following us in this Facebook Live event this afternoon. My name is Besnik Mehmeti, and I am the coordinator of, on behalf of the Association of Tuscan Municipalities of the Designscapes project. And here with me, I have my honored colleagues that will discuss this afternoon, let's say, the main achievements of Designscapes. I'd like to say that we are now at the end of a 4-year journey that, and we are celebrating the kickoff event of the Designscapes Unconference. To be honest, this is not the first. We had 2 previous events in the last days, just to experiment with this unconference, let's say, mode. And I believe that it's an unusual unconference, not only for the approach we choose, but I believe that it will be also the starting point of new collaborations and new opportunities, not only for the existing partners of the consortium, but also for the community of Designscapes that we have created through the 3 calls in the last 3 years. So let me just show the agenda of this afternoon, of this welcome plenary. Francesco Molinari, my colleague at the Association of Tuscan Municipalities and project manager of Designscapes, will provide you first an overview of the project. Then we'll enter in the call for pilots, in the 3 call for pilots that the project has run since 2018. And the presentation will be provided by Juergen Jaenhert, the CEO of BWCON. Then, together with our colleague at Tavistock Institute, Kerstin Junge, we'll have an overview of the 99 projects that have been funded through the 3 different calls. And at the end, Jeff Israely from Worldcrunch will show the agenda of the Designscapes Unconference and the approach we have chosen. We'll have a session of 15 minutes for question and answers. And then at 7 o'clock, we should close this meeting. So we have 5 minutes, just 5 minutes delay, which is quite, let's say, manageable, I believe. I would pass immediately the floor to Francesco Molinari for a presentation of the Designscapes project. Please, Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Besnik, for your introduction. I'm sharing my slides. You should start seeing my screen. Now I'll go in presentation mode. If there is anything to be fixed. Okay, I saw you, Besnik. Thank you. So good afternoon also from my side. It was a bit of a challenge for me to overview this project, which is rather complex as the introduction done by our representative of the European Commission in charge of monitoring it already highlighted. So I decided to stay very close to the topic of today's agenda, which is, as you will soon learn, focused on the cascade funding mechanism, to use this jargon expression, which basically means that part of the budget assigned to our project was spent to co-finance additional pilot initiatives proposed by people and organizations from all over Europe. I decided to stay focused on this, first of all, because I only had 15 minutes for this speech, and second, because also the speakers coming after me will continue along this track. And so I think this part of the project can be exhausted with today's presentation, while other aspects more related to the policy implications will be handled across these 2 months of events, occupying part of August and especially September, as will be also mentioned by the last speaker of today, Jeff Israely from Worldcrunch, who is in charge as an organization of coordinating and organizing this special event. So let me go to the point and start from something that happened, as you can see, in 2016, when the European Commission published this call for proposals that Designscapes won. The call was funded by the Horizon 2020 program for research and innovation directly from the European Union, and the topic was user-driven innovation, value creation through design-enabled innovation. And the specific challenge addressed by the call was that at that time, but also today, many public sector organizations and also businesses, SMEs, miss out on the potential to utilize design as a source for improving their performance. Here I should clarify that design in our own jargon does not only mean aesthetic design. That is only a peripheral aspect of our definition of design, which mainly includes, as our project officer Giorgio Costantino was mentioning before, design thinking, problem solving, collaborative problem solving, the involvement of design experts, but also, and especially in this project, the, let's say, general or universal design capabilities that we recognize in every person, and especially, as you will learn, people living in cities. So the idea which made us successful already 5 years ago, or almost so, was to complement with the urban dimension the difficult interplay between design and innovation, as witnessed by the limited number, also confirmed by statistics around Europe, limited number of organizations using design, co-design, user-driven innovation, and so on, to improve their innovation capacities and especially the general performance of their organizations. The urban dimension, why? Again, there is no time now, but we will have time in future events, because we see the urban dimension at the same time as a source of opportunities and a repository of resources. There is a publication explaining all these. You can find it on our website. It's an open access book edited with Springer, where we highlight this interplay between design, innovation, and urban dimension. And this was declined, as I explained, through this cascade funding mechanism, the way to distribute 1.5 million resources we received from the European Commission was to adopt a call mechanism, a public call mechanism under the same rules as Horizon 2020, while at the same time deviating and differentiating ourselves from those rules in several respects. One of our differentiating aspects was this structuring of the call in 3 consecutive rounds, having different deadlines. The first round was open even to natural persons proposing feasibility studies for any kind of innovation, including product, process, methodology, policy innovation, and so on and so forth, which was making a smart combination of design and the urban dimension. And we simply attributed this small amount, incidentally, of money as a voucher to the best proposals, some of which were also invited to participate, to compete at the next stages of the call, but the next stages were reopened to any public or private organization operating in Europe and in all the associate states to the European Union under the H2020 program. So what we did at the second and the third stage, we increased the amount of funding that was subject to detailed accounting through the usual cost statements, and the purpose was to deliver a prototype. So we gave for granted at the second stage that the participants had already developed a feasibility study on their own, with or without the contribution of our project. And then at the third stage, the proof of concept or scalability proof was asked that a prototype developed in one city could be successfully moved and transferred to another urban context. There were, as I mentioned, distinct deadlines, and as you can see from these figures, we were extremely successful in attracting a number of proposals, not only from European countries, but also from overseas countries, multiple numbers of proposals compared with the available seats. And the next three charts, these included, show in yellow the European countries competing but not being successful, and in green the European countries which were successful with at least one winning proposal at the first stage, now at the second stage, and finally at the third stage. As you can see, Western and to some extent Southern Europe were mostly represented in this competition. There was, of course, an issue of inclusion of peripheral countries, which is also demanded by the call, the European call we derived our project from. The evaluation criteria, we had the first group of three evaluation criteria, which were common to all the three stages. We were asking, as reported here, for documented inclusion in the feasibility study, in the prototype, in the scalability proof of elements of our definition of design, which was prevailing over the nature of the underlying innovation. So we were not that interested in the specific innovation, more interested in its linkage with design, as it was required by the original scope of the European call. But we also asked for a clear embedment of these initiatives in the urban context. That was the second evaluation criterion. And finally, as demanded by the call itself, consideration of aspects related to social inclusion, inequality, and so on, which I guess my colleague Kerstin Junge from Tavistock Institute will also mention in her overview of the winners of the three rounds of call. Then we also had a differentiated criteria for the three stages. For the first stage, the feasibility study, we were looking into the ambivalence of proposals, which was a very important element of our own concept in Designscapes, the possibility of these proposals to generate possible solutions to the weak problems that are of greatest importance in our times, such as related to demographic decline, to pollution of our cities or pollution in general, climate change, participation in social and political life, and so on and so forth. While at the same time, we were looking for feasibility studies that were documenting their capacity to have impacts in those directions. When we went to the prototype level, the previous two criteria were substituted by the following ones, looking more introspectively in the originality of the prototypes that were promised, and also a nice element which proved to be very successful, the attitude of the proposers towards the maximum amount of contribution that could be asked, but in some cases they didn't ask, and we established a rule that was giving higher scores to applicants that were not asking for the full or maximum co-financing rate under this call. This criterion was also confirmed in the third and final stage, where, as I said, we evaluated the possibility that projects already at prototype stage, either funded by our own program or the majority not funded by our own program, could be also pushed to the level of transferring the same experience, the same results from the city they were originally developed in to another city. That was also part of our concept, which was looking into the conditions that the urban environment could offer to this purpose. But Designscapes was not only that. This is a picture showing that we also did for the winners of the second and the third stage of the call, an extra training and capacity building support initiative that was, let's say, made available universally to all applicants, some of whom were more active in taking benefit of that, but it was commonly put at their disposal in order to make sure that the promises made in the applications were also confirmed in the real operation of the projects. Then the COVID-19 crisis came up. It affected to a great extent most of the projects in the second and then in the third call phase. We nevertheless allowed extensions in the, let's say, possibility of finalizing the respective activities, so that I can say that only very few of the 99 initiatives we funded overall were not able to finalize their operations at the end of the allowed period. And then, as I said, I will not delve into this because there will be other opportunities across this program in future events of this unconference, but this slide shows that we were, since the very beginning, keen on delivering policy recommendations. This slide comes from the mid-term conference that the project did back in May 2019 at the Committee of Regions on the occasion of the publication of a green paper on design-enabled innovation in cities, which was at that time only taking stock of the results of the first of the three call phases. Now we are at the end of the whole program, and I'm proud of mentioning that we are now delivering and making public a white paper on design-enabled innovation in cities, which will be the subject of one of the last sessions of this conference in September this year. My time's up. Sorry for being too long. I just wanted to point you at the website where you can find a lot of evidence, not only on our project deliveries, but also on the successful initiatives that we funded, many of which are also part of this agenda, distributed agenda of sessions across July, August, and September. And let me also conclude by mentioning that anything that we did was never the output or outcome of individual people's efforts. This was really a joint and I could say communitarian effort with many people, different capacities, different skills, and so on, being engaged concurrently to reach common goals, which may have looked ambitious at the very beginning of this journey, but now have a totally different outlook. Thank you for your time, for listening, and I will stop my presentation now. Besnik, over to you.
Yeah, and I would give now the floor to Juergen Jaenhert, CEO of BWCON, for the Designscapes call for pilots. Please, Juergen.
Okay, hello. So you see my slide, I suppose? All is fine?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
So welcome from my side. We have heard so far that Designscapes was full of design and creativity, and now I dive into the, I would say, part of Designscapes with the lowest level of creativity. This is basically managing the call for pilots. This is basically managing the process, how we finally came to this applicants and how we finally awarded and separated the good ones from the ones we wanted to award from the other ones we could not award due to the lack of money. And I'll go a bit into detail how we managed this process. First of all, of course, the Designscapes website stimulated a bit due to some little scenarios we managed, some kind of innovation we are looking for, and then we published a call on the website, and we further used, of course, the social media and individual communication channels from the partners and from the contacts of the partners, which was finally very successful because, and we have seen from the slides from Francesco that we have reached a lot of countries far beyond just the members of the Designscapes project. So first of all, we have this, you see a screenshot of the webpage where it's the so-called city snapshots, where we have kind of small scenarios, and then of course we published the call, and as I said, this has been spread around, and even beyond EC, we got attendance and visibility. At least we got applications, and at the beginning, of course, you see here there have been published and prepared detailed guides for applicants, how to fill in the application form, what are the rules, what is the expected impact, and you have realized that we have prepared 3 stages. So in the different stages we had, of course, different criteria from the evaluation. We have also seen later, and I come back to this. And then, of course, the way how we make these different applications comparable in a transparent evaluation process. This is basically what we did here. You see here the guide for applicants, an FAQ, and of course the possibility to contact us via the email and have this kind of process managed in this website. Afterwards, we have here prepared any kind of application process. You can see here that you can apply. You have here some templates, and then of course there is a parallel study, and so there was also a long discussion. Do we make the application form too complex or not enough complex? Because I mean, the more information we gather, the more we can use for evaluation. But the more complex it is, the more people we might lose because they think it's too complex to apply. But this is of course always a kind of optimization problem. If we do not ask nothing, then it's very easy to attract a lot of people, but then of course evaluation is harder, and we cannot attract. So we try, I think we have made a very good compromise between this, and basically the applicants and the applications I show you later indicates that we have done this quite well. You see here, of course, the kind of process, and you see here also how on the platform we have dealt with the applications, and we had a kind of documentation when we did receive what, and how this overall process was managed in this kind of evaluation platform from Designscapes. Altogether, then we had here different projects and then different status of the project. Some of them have had to be denied, some of them had to be removed because of eligibility checks, which were negative, and so on and so on. And also here you see in the screenshot how we manage this from a data management perspective, this overall process of the Designscapes. Here, this is a screenshot of the first call. And then I go once again in detail to what Francesco already said. This was an integrated concept. So 3 steps: the feasibility study, the prototype, and the scalability. But this has been fully decoupled. Fully decoupled means, I mean, if somebody applied for stage 1 and then further evolved the project to a stage 2 application, this did not give him any kind of additional credits for the evaluation. So this evaluation has been dealt very transparently. So yes, of course, somebody could apply in all the 3 stages, but it does not credit. So in each stage of our concept has been evaluated, fully isolated, fully decoupled in an isolated manner. This is important to say. But of course, so it was possible to jump at any time into the Designscapes project and to leave it at any time. So you see here almost 500 applicants we mobilized, in detail 475. You see here in the call, you see once again the numbers and the dates, but this Francesco already said. And we have awarded altogether 101, which means that there was a chance of roughly 20% to get a Designscapes funding. On the other hand, roughly 375 partly very good ideas could not be funded because of financial restrictions, by the way. So we, of course, but reaching almost 500 applicants indicates that we got the visibility, that the concept was right, and also probably, and that's why I said the compromise between the complexity of an application process on one side, and then of course the attractiveness to apply at all has met. Also because we did not see any kind of correlation that there was a significant dominance of the countries where the Designscapes partner were coming from. No, so Designscapes was broadly visible, far beyond the countries where the Designscapes partner came from. This is what we achieved in this in this application process. And again, I think, and this is of course of high value, we have mobilized 375 additional ideas. We mobilized people to write these ideas down, and hopefully some of them will now realize it, bring it to other activities and so on. And I think this is also a huge value, if this kind of mobilization, because people have something in their mind and now they see the call and then they write their ideas down, and then of course some of them fail, but some of them go to the next iteration, go with this idea to the next stage or to another place in order to realize this idea. And also this is of course a high impact, mobilizing 500 applications, despite of the fact that only 20% roughly could be awarded. So the impact is much higher than this just 100 applicants. So the evaluation was as following. First of all, we used the platform as shown. We made a kind of eligibility check by the project manager. So first of all, the project management, Besnik, Francesco, they made an eligibility check, checking the formal requirements. And then, of course, we had some guidelines for a conflict of interest internally. And then we had a jury, and the jury was from the consortium, but it did not come from the country of the applicant. So we had always 3 independent jury members, 3 different jury members, and none of the 3 came from the country of the applicant. And then there was, at the end, after this evaluation, an overall discussion in a global ranking, which we did jointly in the project. This is similar to the concept you see, doing also in some of the programs with respect to evaluation. This is how the process it works. You see here once again a screenshot from our platform. Here, the general criteria as introduced by Francesco, and then the stage-specific criteria. For in this case, it's an example from call 3. But where we have the 2 stage-specific things, and this was then a table where the evaluators each first individually and then jointly filled in, and then there was a global ranking. I know this from several evaluations I did for the Commission, and this is basically a similar approach as the Commission does or did in several evaluation processes. So this is all I wanted to share with you with respect to the call and the process, how we did and how we finally came to the successful ideas. And now I would like to give back to Besnik or hand over to Kerstin. She will then jump a bit in the detail what are the content of these ideas we have Designscapes has produced. Thank you. Now I stop.
Thank you very much, Juergen, for the clear presentation of the process through which the call was developed. And now we can enter more in the merit of the funded initiatives together with our colleague Kerstin Junge from Tavistock Institute to say deep dive on the 99 funded initiatives. We approved 101 initiatives, but 99 of them got until now the end of their journey. Just to clarify.
Thanks, Besnik, for the introduction. Thank you, Juergen, for the very smooth handover. Let me just, is the presentation visible in presentation mode? Perfect. Thank you. It's very rewarding to see how kind of the different presentations look at the topic from kind of different but complementary angles. So as has been mentioned multiple times before, I've been tasked with giving an overview of the 99 funded initiatives. And I'm doing this really from an evaluation perspective. And what I would say, what this presentation does is draws on findings from 3 rounds of funding, but there are sort of particular aspects where only 1 round will be considered, and my colleagues, my quant expert colleagues, are still number crunching on our latest survey. So some of the figures and data that I'll be presenting are preliminary, and people will have to wait for the evaluation deliverable to get the final figures and analysis. So as I said, I will be talking, so Tavistock Institute has been charged with implementing an evaluation of the Designscapes project, and the task was to develop and implement an evaluation, replication and impact assessment framework to support the Designscapes overall vision, mission, objectives and outcomes. So we've been working in collaboration with all partners and the funded initiatives, really to look at 4 questions which we designed to speak to the overall mission of Designscapes in the context of the call and how it's been framed. And these are worth just quickly reiterating because they frame sort of the focus of what I'm going to tell you. So the first question is around inclusiveness and reducing inequality in citizens' access to innovation, which is what Francesco spoke to, which is what we've been which is one of the things we've been focused on, because it was quite a strong focus of the call, which Designscapes was successful under. Then we were interested in question of co-creation. So to what extent does Designscapes and the pilots for funding support co-creation, and does this co-creation process lead to successful innovation? Then we were interested in looking at performance and efficiency of organizations, that was part of the call as well. And the approach we've been taking is one of what we call and what is called behavioral additionality. So we were interested in focusing what has Designscapes funding achieved in terms of stimulating skills development, knowledge increases amongst the funded pilots. So aspects that can be linked to competitiveness. And we made that decision to take this approach because of the relatively small amounts of funding. So kind of impact on balance sheet, which is kind of another way, I guess, of looking at economic gains, we thought was an unrealistic objective. And then, of course, the urban context. What is one of the is the last focal point of our evaluation, because it is kind of the Designscapes' unique selling point, if you like. So, what I wanted to explore briefly in the next 10 or 15 minutes were basically some findings around those areas. So, where did the pilot ideas come from? What the teams look like? What findings can we tease out about what happened to funded teams in terms of skills, knowledge, and capability development? What happened to urban networks? A big thing is sort of the diffusion of design thinking, both across the EU, as Francesco mentioned, the interest not to focus funding on particular countries, but get that out, but also within urban networks, citizens and other actors perhaps not as exposed to design thinking previously. Question about commercial and social gains, and then some qualitative and subjective assessment by the funded pilots about the anticipated impacts. So the pilot ideas, we've heard quite a bit about how they were selected, how many were selected, and what the process was. What I wanted to focus on a little bit is just telling a story about what, from a sort of very top level bird's eye perspective, what were some of the structural elements of the funded pilots. So you can see that in terms of the successful pilots, that's the chart to the left. There's a sort of geographic focus, as Francesco said. Focus is perhaps the wrong word, but we've got perhaps more pilots that were from Southern and Western Europe. However, that's only part of the picture, because the consortium was very mindful of that inclusion aspect. And actually, if you're looking at success rates, what we're finding is that applications from Eastern Europe were significantly more likely to succeed than applications from other regions. And that's also partly because there was an idea to spread, if you like, the funding across different parts of the European Union. Looking at the types of organizations that led the winning teams, there are probably maybe two things to say. It's interesting that about 40% self-declared as being businesses, and that contrasts quite interestingly with sort of 3% of applications being led by organizations that classified as sort of a governmental organization, which perhaps speaks to sort of some of the hypotheses that we might have about how kind of where sort of the driver for design enabled innovation lies. That was a very clear sense about sort of the unique opportunity that Designscapes offered applicants in offering a focus on design on the one hand, a focus on the urban context, the user-centeredness, but also in almost mirroring the design process in the phasing of the call, and that sort of the people who applied to you can see here were quite overwhelmingly from a background where they already had significant expertise in relevant areas. Really appreciated this opportunity to iterate both their work, but also in how they could choose to access funding or not to. So continuing to go kind of with the themes of sort of the kind of enhancing the uptake of design enabled innovation and kind of inclusiveness of the process and making those innovations more accessible. we looked at some of the, this is just a slide on some of the demographic criteria of funded pilots. So I've already said the teams were overwhelmingly declaring that they had significant and advanced experience. And so I think the kind of the other side of that is that the development of the project ideas that came to us were primarily perhaps co-created among sort of professionals. And as you can see on the top right, comparatively very few ideas actually involved citizens and non-experts involvement at project creation. Now that ratio is slightly different, which is why I've kept it separate for round 3. But those 20% we need to bear in mind is basically 2 out of 10 projects, but regardless, a kind of slight change. What is interesting in terms of, again, thinking about kind of sort of inclusiveness and kind of access to design and what that, you know, like diversity means. What we've achieved is pretty much a sort of 50% across the board proportion of female team members. And that is, I do believe that is significant when we consider that historically, often kind of a lot of design, product design and other design has tended to be male oriented. There were some interesting stories in the press about what that means, for instance, for policewomen's uniforms and the comfort of wearing them. And again, sort of citizens as end users from the sort of from the people with various disadvantages, or kind of normal citizens, ordinary citizens, if you like. Again, sort of a nice focus on those, and noticeable that the last round, pretty much all projects mentioned citizens as kind of the end users. I'm not seeing the clock, I should say, so I will, Besnik, maybe you can give me a 5-minute warning, yeah, when the time is up. Thanks very much. So going now to kind of a bit deeper on where the ideas came from, and playing with the idea of the urban context and the hypothesis that the urban context is a rich source, not just of problems of manifested, but also of solutions to be found. We looked a little bit more analytically at where those ideas came from and how they were co-created, and found 3 clusters of projects and how the ideas were generated. So the first one, which links to the involvement of end users, is kind of this idea that some projects were very strongly embedded in teams' lived experience of a particular problem. So there was an experience which people had, which motivated them to apply. So the users of the idea were very much also content experts, and as a result, tended to both own the problem and the solution that was developed. The second cluster is the one that we found most frequently, which is sort of the idea that project ideas were developed by professional expertise or drawing on existing work, existing products. And this often involved sort of the professionals and the teams sharing knowledge with users in order to improve the project idea. So the sort of end users became providers of information, but interestingly, through this co-creation process and taking that seriously, there were examples where users actually ended up owning, changing and modifying the output that came from people's work. And then the third way of developing project ideas was very much kind of more the sort of top-down academic approach, and that, which wasn't very often, I should say again, but that seemed to have the effect of being much less owned and much more risky in terms of being adopted by local end users. So 3 different ways of co-creating and kind of thinking about how innovations, where ideas come from, and what that will mean eventually for the probability of kind of them being rumbling on and kind of being adopted and used more widely. So the second point is about what participation in Designscapes, and kind of that unique opportunity that seemed to have been created for teams meant for building pilot team skills and knowledge. So this particular slide refers only to the round 2 pilots, because in that stage, we carried out a quasi-experimental survey, so comparing results between funded pilots and applicants on the skills and knowledge gains. And interestingly, though my colleagues weren't particularly surprised, if I'm being honest, that comparison work did not produce any statistically significant change in skills and confidence among, in terms of using design processes, methods, and tools between funded and non-funded pilots. The only difference was using theory of change and the ability to do that. Now, the main explanation for that result was basically that teams already started from a very high level of knowledge, and with the difference, with the exception of theory of change, this is where kind of the impact of Designscapes and the training that was offered could be seen. So there's an interesting difference between this experimental work and then the self-reported outcomes, which is what we've also focused on in round 2, but also for round 3 pilots for good reasons, which I won't go into. So these are very different. So these are just 3 areas that we looked across those 2 funding rounds. And actually, the sort of the main message across these 3 areas, which is using design thinking, ability to generate evidence on impact, and stimulating new ways of working, all arguably for social innovations using design, quite critical areas. We're seeing very high rates of projects saying they completely or to a large extent have had this result. There's an interesting variation between round 2 and round 3, which I thought I would speak about, which is simulating the new ways of working, which seems to have happened less based on this data in round 3. However, we haven't looked at it in detail. However, I think what's probably happened is that quite a few of the round 3 pilots also received round 2 or round 1 funding, and that perhaps what happened is that kind of the big impetus came from those rounds, but that's just an hypothesis at this point. And what seems to have happened in terms of, for instance, stimulating new ways of working is that the exposure and the use of design thinking for scaling and for prototyping seems to have made organizations much more susceptible to using similar tools and work going forward. So that's the quote at the bottom about lowering thresholds to incorporating design methods. And in terms of using design tools, people are saying that kind of it really helped them adjust the tools to users' needs. So some really good results. As Francesco mentioned, the Designscapes capacity building program was also offered in order to offer the funded pilots an opportunity to get in touch with sort of current and latest thinking about design and design-enabled innovation. And the chart on the right-hand side combines feedback from the prototyping and the scalability pilots. And we can see actually, when asked about the future use of the knowledge they gained from this capacity building program, it's quite a chunky group of people who said they will use it to a large extent or to a moderate extent. And some of the things people valued was having that handbook, the kind of the toolbox of methods. They found that a valuable resource, sharing knowledge about their project, learning about evaluation, listening to new approaches, and also not wasting valuable resources. Some of the things people said about the program. Okay, so the urban networks, that's another quite interesting area that we looked at. So one of the questions about diffusing design and kind of sort of enhancing the take-up, I guess, is how many people did people engage in their local, engage others in their local context in the Designscapes funded work, and perhaps also how many of these people were new to design thinking. The assumption being that if you're being exposed to a new way of thinking, that might have an interesting effect on getting you to think differently and paying more attention to these things going forward. So these numbers need to be looked at a little bit in particular the citizens, but it's quite clear that kind of people reached out quite widely to citizens, and perhaps less so to for-profit enterprises. But interestingly, in terms of contributing to some kind of indirect capacity building, the public administrations and not-for-profit organizations featured quite highly. And that happened, for instance, through working with public administrations and increasing an awareness about a design-led way of working. So making visible how it was important and also perhaps increasing a sort of comfort level with sort of iteration. And there were, for private businesses, there were examples of training people up in using design tools themselves. So interesting diffusion effect, I think. Benefits of co-creation that we're seeing is bringing people together, especially where people were generated bottom-up, ideas were generated bottom-up, to enrich the final output. Where ideas were developed by sort of based on professional experience. It was very much about refining the innovation and creating the ownership by users. And where ideas came more from sort of the world of academia, it was very much about understanding the user needs and market interest. So people did recognize and see the value of co-creation and the sort of design-led way of working. So these two figures report separately on the prototype pilots, on the scaling pilots, because the question is slightly different, but the results quite similar in the sense that the impetus that Designscapes gave through the initial funding was assumed to sort of resonate after the project, continue after the project ended. So the prototype pilots, over 80% thought it was either very likely or quite likely that they were going to take the prototype to market, going to the next stage. And the scaling pilots, there was actually nobody who said it was unlikely that they would stop the scaling work. It was overwhelmingly very likely or quite likely that the work will continue, with a few saying that was neither likely or unlikely. So kind of, so quite an impetus. And if you're looking at the funding for this, people were assuming that they needed, we're looking at a range of funding options, let's put it like that. The scaling pilots had not overwhelming. There were very few who had already attracted additional funding, but those that had, the funding varied between 4 and around 24,000 euro to enable them to continue with the scaling work that happened. Funded and kickstarted, perhaps, so accelerated by Designscapes. For citizens, there's some data about awareness, knowledge, and behavior changes relating to the value of design thinking, awareness of environmental impact, knowledge and skills of technology, design tools, and some engagement with nature. This data is hoping to improve on that with the third round of case study work and make it a bit tighter. But some indication that actually there's benefits to citizens from being involved in the design process itself. In terms of projects thinking assumptions about to what extent they might achieve the impact that they wanted to achieve in about a year's time, the big picture trend, as far as I could see, was quite similar between the prototypes and the scalability pilots, and that there was a little bit of a split in the confidence, where people thought they were slightly more confident of sort of achieving the quality of life and social inclusion impacts than the climate impacts, crisis of democracy, and economic impacts, which is perhaps intuitively kind of perhaps makes a bit of sense. but we'll need to sort of look into that in a bit more detail. Possible barriers to achieving the impacts were named as COVID restrictions, accessing funding needed to continue the work, securing cooperation with others, and constraints of time, human resources, and public attitudes to the innovation. And by way of just briefly providing a summary, I think it's fair to say, and that's come out of previous presentations as well, that Designscapes has offered an innovative funding instrument that's plugged a gap in the market and seems to be showing some multiplier effect. But we need multiple funding sources to continue to support design-enabled innovations through the innovation cycle. The urban context can be a source of design-enabled innovation or funding solutions. And in particular, engagement requires engagement with local actors where the aim is system change. The inclusiveness of citizens and users' access to innovation is supported where they're seen as equal holders of the knowledge in the innovation process. So less so when innovations are top down, but more so if their specific contribution is really acknowledged and explicitly worked with. And so we can cautiously say that the Designscapes grant has had some self-reported benefits linked to increased competitiveness. The statistical comparison showed the change, so it's self-reported data, which is nevertheless valuable. And that was the story, the bird's eye view of the funded pilots so far, and I will have to figure out how to stop sharing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kerstin, for this detailed and very clear presentation, very interesting. And much of the success of Designscapes has to be shared with our coordinators of communication with Worldcrunch. And here we have this afternoon the CEO of Worldcrunch, Jeff Israely, who will introduce us the approach of the Designscapes and conference and provide us also an insight about the different events that will be unfolded from now to end of September nearly. Please, Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Besnik, and thanks to my other colleagues for their presentations. I think the reason that we're going last in the communication part of this, in this particular segment of the unconference is going last is because we really are now at a phase where we're looking to the future, and the role and the concept behind the unconference, which I want to speak specifically about here, is really how to take all of the work that the project has achieved, that Kerstin and Juergen and the others have described here, how to project it towards the future, or as Kerstin just said, how the projects that have been funded and how the project of Designscapes as a whole can resonate beyond the life of this particular project. And so, by the way, just a quick note that this is, I'm just going to speak. I've put our thought together. I don't have, we can consider this an unpresentation about the unconference. But it's really in large part because it's a new concept. It's a work in progress, as it were, a different way to think about disseminating the results of this project. Once this process is over the next 3 months, that will be a time to sort of take stock in in this new approach. But it's really an ongoing process. We're in the middle of it right now. This is one step, one segment of the unconference. But before going speaking about the future and where the project goes, just a little bit of history in terms of how we got here. And as Besnik said, communication has been essential, and it's been a team effort with all the members of the consortium. And through most of the project, it was done in sort of, let's say, traditional ways, both on and offline. It was super important to get the word out to the right people, so we could get the best applicants in for all the calls. And to get a diverse mix of applicants, and to have them know what the criteria were, what the vision of the consortium was, of what Designscapes really was about, to get the right projects in, and then obviously also to disseminate out, to communicate out the projects, the winning projects. And what they were about, and how they were using the funds that were provided by Designscapes to advance their work, and to exchange amongst the different projects and around the consortium, to make the most of all the talent and the knowledge and the ideas that were out there. But then obviously COVID hit. And it affected the project, and it affected the projects. It affected us all, obviously, it goes without saying. And for Designscapes in particular, it forced us to rethink the final phase of the communication, which traditionally is all sort of geared towards a conclusive celebratory conference. And so with Francesco, really the brainchild of Francesco, but working together with Besnik and other members of the consortium, there was this idea of an unconference. And an unconference isn't a single event, it's a series of events, to be more spontaneous, almost more informal, and more substantive on the projects themselves, and using, we found ourselves in a phase of, as we all know, the event, the world of events, the world of communication, the world of interaction, has changed for everyone during the pandemic, with the lockdowns, and we were all sent online, and we were all doing everything on Zoom, including conferences, including sharing ideas, including meetings. And so there was, by the time we arrived at this final stage of the project, there was this idea to sort of embrace the digital aspect, but to do it in a more distributed way, with a series of encounters online, in multiple languages, in local settings, where the projects themselves and the people working on the projects could share their knowledge, and have that happen over a 3-month period, to sort of reimagine what a kind of concluding conference could be. It's actually an unconference. It's meeting digitally, and sharing our knowledge, and we're underway. This will go through September, we're going to see what the results are of this process. But what we do know is that it also gives us an opportunity to create a video record of the findings of the project to refer to in the future, both as a consortium as a whole and the individual projects, and to the timing of it also coincides with the new European Bauhaus initiative. And we see this as a way, you know, in some way it's very meta. We're thinking about the design of conferences and design thinking in terms of also how we meet and how we share knowledge. And we hope that this can be a sort of a laboratory and perhaps even a reference as we look forward also towards the, you know, the EIT knowledge and innovation communities for culture and creativity that's coming up. That this process of sharing knowledge, distributing findings can happen in different ways with our digital tools across Europe. There will be a final session at the end of September with keynote speech from Professor Andrew Feenberg, who's a real leader in the field, to sort of put the cherry on the pie of this unconference. And you know, we know also, and we hope, and we expect that we will meet again in person, and that, you know, the new world will of course have that physical physical aspect and the benefits of meeting in person, that comes that can only come with more traditional meetings, but we think that you know, that this unconference model is part of the future, and so we're excited to be experimenting with this, and yeah, and thanks for again for all the contributions on the communication activities from all our partners.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for your speech. And now it's 6:45. I would pass, let's say, the floor to any question from the audience. Let me check on Facebook if there is any comment or any question. It seems there are no. Any of you would like to make to each other any question? Otherwise, I can start in the reverse order. Sorry. So I'll start from Jeff, go to Kerstin, then to Juergen, and finally to Francesco. So Jeff, Designscapes is a quite unique project involving, I mean, as in all European projects, different partners, 12 in our case, but also creating a community, and a community of design-driven innovators now in cities. So what are the main lesson learned? What is the main lesson learned, or what are the main lesson learned from you as a communication agency thanks to Designscapes?
Well, in terms of working with partners throughout the course of the project, you know, first there's the challenge, but also the opportunity of working with people from different competencies, different regions, different languages, and to be able to get all of all of the great input that people can offer, while at the same time, sort of, as they say in the communication world, staying on message. You know, we had a mission, we had a clear idea of what it meant to seek design-enabled solutions for urban challenges, and we wanted to bring all the knowledge in towards that objective. And so, you know, there's that aspect throughout the course of the project, but then also I think, you know, this was a project that was distributing funding in 3 calls, and there was an evolution, you know, to be aware of the sort of chronology, the natural chronology of a project over time, and how to build momentum as you've got as more and more people become aware of it, and the right people who are interested in the mission of the project, and so I think we succeeded in that, in building the momentum over time. And yeah, and then the next the last remaining challenge is to give it a life after the project and the project, this H2020 project itself, and have Designscapes and the funded projects live on.
Thank you, great. And Kerstin, for you a question. You and your colleagues at Tavistock Institute have been interviewing tens of applicants, both successful or not. And what can be, I mean, what is the main criticality you have, let's say, discovered through the different interviews you have done about Designscapes project?
Across both rounds of both prototypes and scalability pilots, I think main criticality, I don't know whether it's a criticality, but one of the things that struck me was in the last ones, in the sort of scaling pilots, was the high close relationship between a sort of iterative design-led way of working and the process you need to go through as you're scaling a social innovation. So both are ways of working that iterate and use data to kind of change and adapt. So it did strike me. So first of all, I learned that whilst the processes are similar, there's something that design-led thinking can learn from a data-led process of scaling. The second insight that I did have is that was around the sort of significant value of design thinking, and the advantage, if you like, of people who know about using design tools and methods have in replicating, scaling social innovations within the area or beyond. And I think it's an interesting field, kind of thinking of kind of social change, how that's going to happen, and maybe sort of competitive advantages in that field. I think that's quite an interesting thought to pursue. So I don't know if it's a criticality, but it's something that struck me.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your answer, Kerstin. And I pass to Juergen for a question about the platform we used for the call. So Juergen, we count in your in an existing platform you own at BWCON, and how much, I'd like to know how much the Designscape calls have contributed to improve your platform, if there has been any contribution, of course.
Thanks, Besnik. I mean, first of all, we have to understand a bit the term platform. A platform could be a pure technical infrastructure. A platform could be a technical infrastructure and a managed process, and a platform could be a community. And that's why I think the term platform has to be specified precisely. If you talk about a platform, then of course we got some things where we think, yes, we have optimized some relationship with our subcontractor in a platform, but this is a technical thing which is of course the way looking pure on a platform, on a technical thing. But I mean, a lot of technical platforms only do not work if on top of the platform there is no moderator. On top of the platform, by the way, there is no trust on top of the platform, and trust not with respect to trust is on two dimensions, trust from person to platform, and trust is between the different people sharing their ideas. Also here we need trust. And if we now take this answer in the context of Designscapes, where we have the ultimate goal to stimulate innovation, then we have a plenty of ideas, a large number of ideas, and we have a kind of rough idea which of these ideas could be transferred to other places. And of course, the idea stimulates others to try to transfer this idea to other places. And this is of course of high value. Sometimes, I mean, we did an evaluation, and our evaluation was on concepts, not on results, of course. And of course, we evaluated concept, and now we will see that transferring an idea from A to B is not so easy because you have to understand if the context in the other environment in different countries is different or not. And this, of course, is a very, very good first step. However, I mean, this is what the project as Designscapes can afford, but it's also underlining the boundaries of such a concept. Because, I mean, if you evaluate on concepts and not on things you have done at the end of the day, and I mean, we cannot formally prove the transferability of one idea from one country to another. We can think and we can judge with our experience, but we cannot prove. That's why I think this kind of initiative is very important to generate and increase any kind of platform. But now I use a platform beyond the pure technical thing. And we will have not only one platform in the world, we have different platforms. And we need places where these people share and exchange ideas and present ideas and stimulate others and create communities and start a process which then is required but probably insufficient in order to get innovation, because any innovation will then provoke any kind of resistance. Any innovation, there is no innovation which is not provoking resistance. And at the end of the day, a crisis might help to lower a bit the resistance against innovation, but the inertia of the people not to change is still there. And this is something where, of course, we can put an impact, we can have an impact, but I mean, at the end of the day, we will see how far we went with Designscapes. At least we have developed a process and a concept and a method how to get this kind of ideas. And of course, platforms are needed, but I personally do not believe on technical platforms only. Because at the end of the day, innovation is people business. You cannot do with an anonymous platform, and it's people business. And this is, I think, the core thing, but this was clear also before Designscapes. It's people business, and it's interaction, it's communication between people. And that's why the way how we moderate on top of a platform will have a bigger impact than the pure platform. This is a bit how I think we should judge this, and that's why, yes, we have improved. Yes, but the process is probably the value, because the platform, at the end of the day, even if we enrich it with AI, is a stupid IT thing.
Thank you, Juergen. It's very, very interesting insights, and I like very much the definitions of platforms you provided. And now the last question. It's a burning question, Francesco, for you. So what are the future plans of design-enabled innovation in cities after the end of Designscapes?
I think I need another hour to reply to this, but I only have 2 minutes, so I will make it very short. I think also after the end of the unconference period, so in October, November this year, when we will write the final report of the project and also announce the revamped website of Designscapes, where every possible output of 4 years of work, as you said in the beginning, Besnik, will be published and made available, including a searchable database of all the funded initiatives, the 99 funded initiatives, plus additional evidence from other initiatives we searched and surveyed at the very beginning of the project, plus, everything will be made available. But this would not be enough because, for example, it's only thanks to the continuous effort in communicating the project and disseminating the project around that, especially the Worldcrunch team did, that we have been successful in having so much outreach around the project. And it is quite inevitable that lacking the extra money to finance new calls, it would be quite a challenge to ensure continuity to this effort, not to mention that the consortium itself will be dismantled after the end of September. So what can we credibly envisage? I have 3 things in mind, but as I repeat, they will be in a way cross-checked. Thanks to this journey we will be making until the end of September with these periodic sessions with different topics, especially topics that were not dealt with today. I have 3 possibilities in mind. One is the new initiative of the new European Bauhaus that was launched by the new European Commission, the von der Leyen Commission, as one of the flagship initiatives for the coming years. I believe that the new European Bauhaus holds several traits of closeness to our project, our philosophy, for reasons I cannot state now, but we will deal with them extensively in a couple of sessions we envisage in September. To make it very short, the contribution to the new European Bauhaus will exactly be community building and community management, the way we have done until now and the way we will be able to report to the European Commission and to the general public in the way I mentioned before. Second contribution, this call mechanism here, with all the goods and bads, the lessons learned, I sincerely believe there is a lot to be shared and put at everyone's disposal. Everyone willing to replicate this experience should be exposed not only to the results as we have done today, but also the background, the technical documents, all the informative elements which could allow anyone a replica of this approach, which has several advantages, including that it has demonstrated multiplier effects in a good share of the countries and regions and cities we have been operating within. So whoever would be interested should be exposed to our technicalities, and we will remain available to further information spreading as we still want to stay in this business. Third and final, more blurred perspective, let me mention the upcoming call of the European Innovation, the European Institute of Technology for the formation of a knowledge community, knowledge and innovation community in the domain of cultural and creative industries. This call is expected to be published before the end of this year, and the results will be in 1 year time. I don't think that as a consortium or on behalf of the 99 initiatives we funded, there can be any chance to become embedded in either of the consortia that are already being formed to reply successfully to that call. What I know for sure is that whoever the winner of that call, there will be a moment, probably in 1 year time, when the winners will start looking around to find interesting hooks in the territories to spot the opportunities for additional promotion and additional funding of related initiatives. And I am pretty sure that in 1 year time, we will still be here with our fellows, with the initiatives we are familiar with, and especially you, Besnik, you have kept a one-by-one connection with all the applicants, the winners on the occasion of the reporting and the cost statements and so on. So I'm pretty sure that also thanks to this unconference initiative, never forget that we have managed to invite about more than 15, probably 20 different initiatives funded by our call to present themselves, their results on the occasion of individual 1 hour sessions that we are distributing across July and August. This is a sign of vitality. This is evidence that what we have done is not fake. It is really not only authentic, but also promising and productive in many respects, which will be highlighted very soon in other initiatives we are working at. So I would like to conclude by saying I'm very optimistic regarding the possibility of giving continuity to this initiative, despite all the constraints that I mentioned in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Optimism is what we need in this tough period. And we have exceeded our time for 5 minutes. I believe for the audience, it was anyway worth it to stay with us until 6 minutes past 7. So I'd like to thank everyone, our speakers, Giorgio, Costantino from the Commission, our project advisor, all the people that were following us through Facebook. And I'd like to invite you to stay tuned in our unconference, as from next Monday, we'll start every day during next week to show the experiences and the results achieved by the projects we have funded through the 3 calls. So thank you very much, and see you Monday with a straight up project presentation.